In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at a question that I've been asked many times throughout my career, and it's probably one that many of you have asked in working with various plants for bonsai. And that is, how do you deal with multiple branches emerging from the same location, whether that be on the trunk or within the branch structure of the tree? So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. So first and foremost here, I think it's best to try to answer the question, why is it necessary in the first place to eliminate multiple branches that are emerging from the same location, again, on a trunk or within the branch structure of the tree? And really the main, and I would say only answer, is that it's because it causes inverse taper if we leave more than 2 or 3 branches in a given location. So this is especially true when it comes to pines, but it's also true with many other species like maples and junipers as well. But with pines, it's most prominent because these trees have what's known as a whorled leaf pattern or a whorled phyllotaxy. And what that means is that in any given location on the trunk or within the branch structure of the tree, you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 or sometimes even 6 or 7 branches and buds emerging from the same location. And this is going to cause extreme swelling and extreme inverse taper with these plants. So what I want to do in this episode here, in this tutorial, is walk you through the process of how I eliminate those on a pine specifically, because again, it's such a great example of this issue that you're going to run into. And we're down here at Fujikawa Koken Nursery in Osaka today, so I'm going to see if I can find a pine here at the garden and walk you through my thought process when it comes to removing multiple branches back to 1 or 2 branches in any given location on the trunk or within the structure of the tree. All right, so let's take a look at this very cool Chuhin or medium-sized Japanese black pine here. This is one that I found on the roof here at Fujikawa Koken. This is something that's relatively common here in Japan, but I would say, maybe in the United States, it's gonna be a little more difficult to find a tree that's this far along. But the concepts and ideas that we're gonna talk about here are gonna be applicable to basic nursery stock material as well. So stuff you're gonna find at Lowe's and Home Depot in the United States, or home centers in Europe, for example, or down in Australia as well, will apply to those trees. So let's bring the camera in closer and I'm going to show you what the internal branch structure of this tree looks like. All right, so if we take a look at the first 2 branches on this tree, we've got our primary branch on the right-hand side here and our secondary branch on the left-hand side. You can see that they're basically straight across from one another. The tree has a little bit of curvature to it. So it looks like the one on the left is slightly higher, ever so slightly higher than the one on the right. But in fact, if the tree was oriented in its natural straight form here, they would be basically across from each other. And you can see that as a result of that, there's inverse taper and swelling in this area. So in an instance like this, what I would be doing with a tree like this is in fact eliminating one branch or the other. So with this particular tree, since our primary branch is on the right-hand side here, and we actually have a secondary branch to the back that's a little bit higher up, that means I can remove this branch on the left-hand side here, turn it into a small gin, and use the branch from the rear that again is a little bit higher coming out of the trunk to drop it down and pull it around towards the front to replace this one. So it's not that important where the branches emerge from the trunk. It's much more important where the pads end up relative to each other and relative to the trunk as well. So eliminating a big branch like that on the left-hand side is really not a big deal as long as we have something to replace it. And that will help eliminate inverse taper in this area over time. Now, when you're dealing with really small nursery stock material or even medium-sized and potentially even large material as well, the amount of branching that you can take off of the tree at any given time is going to be dictated by not only the health of the tree, but more importantly, the species that you're working with. So if you have a brand new piece of nursery stock material that is essentially like a ball of foliage and you want to eliminate back to 1 or 2 branches emerging from any given location on the trunk, and it's going to remove more than say 60 or 70% of the foliage if you do that all at once, I recommend, when it comes to pines in particular, that you avoid doing that cutback all at once. Maybe remove, let's say, 30, 40, 50% of the branches that you don't need now. Let the tree recover for a season and then repeat the process the next fall, for example. So when you're working with pines, the fall really is a great time to do a cutback like this. So, again, cut back 30, 40, 50% of what you don't need, let the tree recover through the growing season next year, and then in the fall of next year, eliminate the remaining 20 or 30% of the branches that are going to be out of place or again, cause swelling in certain areas of the trunk. Now the story is a little different when it comes to broadleaf evergreen and deciduous material. This is going to be a little bit dependent on the species, but in general, if you're dealing with relatively young material and material that's quite healthy, you can do a much heavier cutback all at once, but you need to do it at the right time of year. So if you've got, again, multiple branches emerging from the same location from the trunk or within the branch structure, I would recommend allowing these trees to flush hard in the first part of spring, harden off by, in the northern hemisphere, usually mid to late May or early June, and then doing a hard cutback at that point. So with these species, in general, you can typically cut back anywhere from 30 to sometimes 80% of the growth all at once, and the trees will usually respond relatively well to that. So you don't necessarily have to do it in a two-step process when it comes to these species. So I want to show you an example here of a tree that has branches that are relatively close to one another on opposite sides of the trunk, but they're different enough in height as to help the tree avoid swelling. So you can see here we have our primary branch on the lower left-hand side of the tree and a secondary branch on the right-hand side here. They look almost parallel to one another, but the one on the right is slightly higher, enough so that this is not going to cause swelling in the center section of the tree. So when you're working with nursery stock material, look for those subtle differences because in the long run, they can make a big difference in helping you avoid inverse taper on your plants. So here's an excellent example of a deciduous tree, in this case a trident maple, that has had branches eliminated that were opposites or emerging from the same location on the trunk. So you can see here we've got our primary branch down low. There's nothing directly across from it. Next branch up is this one here. Then it goes back and forth kind of around the trunk, but you can see that branches have been eliminated that were emerging from the same spot on the trunk. So for example, this very large branch here, or that used to be here, was removed probably a good 15, 20 years ago to help prevent swelling in this area here to allow for better taper. So even though this was quite a large branch when it was removed, as you can tell by the wound that's basically healed over at this point, it was worth it with this plant to again help avoid creating that inverse taper here. Now, in addition to the trunks of our trees, both with conifers and deciduous material, within the branch structure of the trees, we're also trying to create a bifurcating branch structure by eliminating threes back to twos. So this is a Japanese black pine here that's been developed for many decades as a bonsai, and you can see it's been built out with a perfect bifurcating structure. It splits here with our secondary branches, then it splits again into tertiary branches and splits again even further out. And that process continues all the way out to the very end. And this is simply a process throughout the years of removing typically the center shoot or the center bud and leaving just the two laterally oriented ones. This can be done again, not only with pines, but also with junipers as well, maples, all sorts of deciduous trees and broadleaf evergreens too. And you can create this absolutely beautiful and well-balanced bifurcating branch structure. All right, so that was a quick and dirty rundown of how I would approach eliminating multiple branches emerging from the same location within a given tree. Hopefully you guys picked up on a few tips that you can apply to your own bonsai going forward. Again, I know a lot of the material that I've shown here is maybe a little bit higher end material, but these techniques and these ideas apply across the board, even to the most basic of nursery stock or cutting material, for example. So a big shout out to Bonsai Empire for asking me to do this episode, and congratulations on 25 years. Here's to another 25 going forward. Thank you guys so much for checking out this tutorial. Look forward to seeing all of you next time around, and until then, take care.